Well, in fact, Mr. Speaker, the plan is working because poverty is falling in our country. Since 2010, there are 1.7 million fewer people in poverty, including hundreds of thousands of children.
Let's break that bollocks down.
Since 2010, there are 1.7 million fewer people in poverty.
Well, imagine the shock for the Prime Minister when he finds out the number of people living in relative poverty has actually increased by 900,000 since 2010. That's almost 1 million. And over 14 million people are now living in poverty in this country. Over 14 million. If all that's not appalling enough, a shocking new report from Joseph Rowntree Foundation has just found poverty in this country is actually deepening. In 2021-22, a staggering 6 million people living in poverty were in very deep poverty, with an income far below the standard poverty line. That's 4 in 10. And more than twice as many, over 12 million people, had experienced very deep poverty in at least 1 year between 2018 and 2021. It's absolutely shocking. What reality is this Prime Minister living in?
Including hundreds of thousands of children.
The UK has just been ranked by UNICEF, that's the United Nations Children's Fund, as the worst among the world's richest countries in child poverty levels. Just think about that. And according to latest government statistics, there were 4.2 million children living in poverty in the UK in 2021-22. That's a staggering 1 in 3 children. And if all that's not heartbreaking enough, the number of children in food poverty has actually doubled.
Mr. Speaker, the plan is working because poverty is falling in our country.
The new report from Joseph Rowntree Foundation has found progress to eradicate hardship in Britain has actually stalled under the Conservatives since 2010. We've now got millions of people living in poverty. 9 million are skipping meals and cutting back on food. Millions more can't afford to heat their homes, and record numbers are using food banks. We've even seen a shocking rise in Victorian-era diseases since Sunak became Prime Minister. We've actually got GPs prescribing nutritional drinks to starving patients and thousands being hospitalised with malnutrition. And Sunak proudly tells MPs this.
Mr. Speaker, the plan is working because poverty is falling in our country.
This Prime Minister is detached from all reality.
I don't want to see anyone relying on food banks, but while they're in place, I have nothing but praise and thanks for the people who run them. But it is wrong to say that we aren't making progress. When I came into this job, inflation was running at 11%. That is the single biggest impact on families' cost of living. And now, thanks to the efforts of this government, most of them opposed by his party, inflation has now been more than halved at 4%. And we're combining that with significant tax cuts to put more money in people's bank accounts at the end of every month.
Well, let's break that one down.
When I came into this job, inflation was running at 11%. That is the single biggest impact on families' cost of living.
Well, bearing in mind the Conservative government have been in power for more than a decade at that point, it's not exactly something to boast about. And the Prime Minister appears to have completely forgotten he was Chancellor and responsible for managing the economy for more than 2 of those years, almost immediately prior to him becoming Prime Minister.
And we're combining that with significant tax cuts.
Well, again, imagine the shock for the Prime Minister when he finds out that under his government, taxes are on course to reach their highest level since the Second World War. The Institute for Fiscal Studies has found that for every £1 the Treasury has taken from taxpayers, less than 25 pence is coming back in tax cuts. And the Prime Minister wants us to slap him on the back. By any standard, Sunak's government is being fundamentally dishonest and outright misleading when talking about tax cuts. In fact, the government's latest tax measures put the UK on course to have the biggest tax-raising parliament in modern history. The Prime Minister then treated us to this gem.
Wages now rising.
Seriously? Real wages in 2024 are forecast to be lower than they were in 2006. Just think about that.
Debt on track to be reduced.
Well, he'll fall off his chair when the Chancellor tells him his government has given us the highest debt in 60 years.